Strong voice, strong opinions. The Rob Snow Show returns on 1310 News and Rogers TV.
Yeah, so again, we're just waiting on Andrew Scheer. He is the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, and he is scheduled to join us any minute now. And again, the Prime Minister's daily briefing, that is coming up as well. He has scheduled some airtime for 11:15. This is always kind of a crapshoot. Does 11:15 mean 11:15? Does it mean 11:20? Does it mean 11:45? You just never know. With Mr. Scheer, obviously we want to talk about the fiscal package. But by the way, has sizably increased in terms of the direct income supports. This was supposed to be originally about $27 billion in income supports, varying income supports, the two, as I said, EI-type programs, GST rebate checks, student loan relief, enhanced Canada Child Care Benefit programs. And now, then that was $27 billion, and now the latest figure is in the range of more than $50 billion. I believe it was $52 to $55 billion. And they've consolidated the two EI programs down into one, the Canada Emergency Response Benefit. And this is the $2,000 a month for the next 4 months. Okay, let's put Andrew Scheer on the line there, Josh, if you could do that for me. Okay, Mr. Scheer, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Yeah, I'm well, sir. Thank you for taking the time. Andrew Scheer is the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, the leader of the official opposition, and we thank you for your time. You're well? You're well, yes, sir, and your family as well. You have quite a large family to be all cooped up, but everybody's well.
Yeah.
And
well, like every Canadian family right now, we're doing our best to follow the health directions. That means 5 kids inside most of the day is a little bit of a challenge, but we're managing.
That's good. I'm glad to hear it. So let's talk about the fiscal measures announced by the government. I know, as I just mentioned, it's gone up sizably from $27 billion to more than $50 billion. Passed nonetheless. What do you think about these measures, sir?
Well, we recognize the fact that many Canadians are seeing a catastrophic drop in income through no fault of their own. We're not talking about a market downturn or a business that had to close its door because of internal problems. We're talking about the government telling restaurants, telling retailers not to open their doors, and as a result, many people have lost their income. So Conservatives are generally supportive of measures that put assistance directly in the hands of Canadians who have been impacted by this. We are worried, though, about the fact that many people may not have jobs to go back to if there isn't more support for small businesses. So we're pushing out the government to provide some assistance to small businesses who have had to close their doors. And of course, as we saw this week, we're going to be watching like hawks that the government doesn't use the new measures that they've given themselves to do things that they've tried to do in the past, or to give themselves too much power without any accountability.
Yeah, well, I certainly want to get into that. But in a few minutes, if you don't mind. $2,000 a month for the next 4 months. And the anticipation is it will be some 4 million Canadians will apply for this. How confident are you that the infrastructure is in place to handle such an influx of applicants, Mr. Scheer?
Well, we're hopeful that this money will be able to get into the hands of the Canadians who need it, but we don't have a lot of confidence in this government. Their handling of this crisis from the very beginning has been, confused. It has been inconsistent. They have been slow to react. Just remember when we were asking questions just a few weeks ago about whether or not the borders should be closed and air travel restricted, the health minister, senior officials in the government were all telling us that we shouldn't be doing that the borders will remain open and that the flights will continue. Just a few days later, they then had to reverse themselves. We've seen massive backlogs in terms of people being able to apply for EI benefits. They waited days and days and weeks to implement the measures under the Quarantine Act, and then they did it without any plans in place for people who are arriving into Canada. So we're not that. There's not a lot of reasons to be confident that they're going to be able to handle the future challenges from this crisis with any more competency than they've shown to this point.
Okay. When you say you would like to see more supports for small business owners, medium-sized business owners, what kind of supports? Do you mean things like an increase in wage subsidies, for example, Mr. Scheer? What specifically?
Yes, so we have called for an increase in the wage subsidy. 10% is just not going to make a difference for most workers. If you consider a restaurant that has not been open in 2 weeks and all the shifts have been canceled, well, there's no wage to subsidize there. There are other examples where businesses may be keeping their doors open, but they've had such a drop in customers that they need more of a subsidy in order to keep the jobs that they do have protected. In addition, we've called for the government to refund the GST that small businesses have collected for the past few months. Most businesses remit their GST quarterly, so there are many small businesses out there that would have had at least 3 months of GST that they're about to have to write a check to the government for. We're saying let them keep it. That will allow them to, pay their rent, to pay off some of their bills, so that if in a few weeks we are able to return our economy to normal, those store owners, those restaurant owners, they'll be able to open their doors and hire back the people who have been out of work. So in order to make sure that people have jobs to go back to, we believe that letting small businesses keep the GST that they've collected is a good way to start.
Okay. Front page above the fold today is this headline in the National Post. As pandemic unfolded, Ottawa sent 16 tons of masks, gear to China. What is your reaction to that revelation, sir?
That is just outrageous. It is negligence of the highest order. I cannot believe when I read that story, it certainly caught me by surprise. When we are talking about the shortages that are already existing here in Canada, when we're talking about doctors and nurses putting themselves at risk, this breaks down to over 50,000 face shields, over 1,000 masks, the masks that are in short supply around the world, 36,000 medical coveralls, over 200,000 gloves. I mean, we're asking our healthcare providers to go literally into harm's way, treating people who have this virus, and we're giving our equipment to China. It is outrageous. Justin Trudeau needs to answer for this. He needs to explain to Canadians why, after the World Health Organization already warned countries that this would spread and that this would be, a very serious health issues, he's packing up our medical equipment and giving it to China. That is just unexcusable.
Okay. Andrew Scheer is with me, leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, leader of the official opposition in the House of Commons. A great parliamentary institution. And I gave the listeners a little civics lesson. Don't need to give you a civics lesson. You've been around long enough, former Speaker of the House. Let's face it, the government of Canada cannot spend any money unless the Parliament of Canada says it's okay, right? Pretty fundamental. It's the way we govern ourselves. So take us inside what it was like to see the draft of that legislation and a concentration of spending, taxing, borrowing authority in basically what Paul Wells describes this morning in Maclean's as the state of Morneau, one individual, the Minister of Finance. It must have been a jaw-dropping moment for you.
Well, it was, and for your listeners who might not have followed the front end of the story, about a week ago, Justin Trudeau announced some assistance measures that he would be making available to Canadians. We looked at them and we said, okay, these are things that we can support. We do believe that this should happen quickly. So when he recalled Parliament, he said that's what the bill would contain. That's what the legislation would contain. When we received the draft copy of it, we saw all kinds of provisions that gave the government sweeping powers, unprecedented powers, powers that hadn't been given to the government during 2 world wars and during other health crises. So we put the brakes on right away, and we said, no way are we going to abandon over 800 years of parliamentary tradition and accountability and checks and balances. If you want to vote yourselves money, you need to bring those proposals to the House of Commons. There was a section that gave the government sweeping powers to set tax rates without votes in the House of Commons all the way till January of 2022. But right away we realized that was probably a red herring, that was something that they were going to pull back on quickly. But there are other measures in the bill that we fought against, and at the end of the day, we forced them to put in all kinds of safeguards, accountability safeguards. If they do want to spend money during this crisis, they do have to show us where it's going, to be accountable to the House of Commons. We've given the House of Commons Finance Committee the power to recall Parliament if they find any abuse or if they find any measure to be unsatisfactory. So we were confident that we'd put enough safeguards in that we allowed the bill to come to the floor of the House of Commons. We did not support all the measures that they gave themselves. We did support the financial package, but not the new measures. But they had already got the support of the Bloc and NDP, so we did allow it the House to decide on that legislation. And we're going to be watching like hawks to see what they do with it.
Okay. Thank you for your time this morning. Very nice to hear from you. Yeah, that's Andrew Scheer, leader of the Conservative Party, leader of the official opposition in the House of Commons. We're still waiting for the Prime Minister. We hope to hear from him when we come back on the Rob Snow Show on Rogers TV and 1310 News.